Hello, everyone. Hello. Dr. Judy here. Dr. Judy of What the Freud, WTF, What the Freud. And tonight we are going to have a topic centered around Ponzi schemes and other ripoffs and who is vulnerable. And we have a special guest I know many of you are familiar with, Robert, who has called in several times, and he has a story to tell. So I'm going to allow him to tell that story. But I want to first start by saying I want everybody to know how much I appreciate your being a listener, and I really, really want you to learn this mind map system. So the PDF book is free. You can download it. Please ask for it. You can also ask for a 15-minute free consultation to learn about the Be the Cause mind map system for healing human disconnect. And yet, once again, I am making the mind map video series available for $95. And I want the money not to be an issue because some people just can't afford even $195. So it's right now on a special $95 for about 8.5 hours of me standing in front of my Be the Cause mind map and breaking it all down for you. So do take advantage of that and understand that there is a cause for what is behind our anxiety, our depression, our defense mechanisms, our horrible patterns, our horrible relationship choices, and on and on and on. And the mind map is geared to going right for the cause and deconstructing it. So with that said, I want to let people know also that I head up the Psychological Healing Center. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist. I have a beautiful team of people who work with me. They're all trained in the mind map system. And this is a call-in show, folks, so please do call in. I think the number is up there, correct? So you can take a look at that and call in. And even though Robert will be talking a lot, we are interruptible, so please do ask questions. So, Ponzi schemes. Let's start with this article. So here's an article by Harold Pollack, February 8th, 2016. Why were so many Madoff victims Jewish? And this article is not about Jews being ripped off or Jews ripping Jews off. This is a theme of people who are culturally in a group ripping each other off, because when you have an affinity toward a certain culture, a certain religion, a certain group, and if somebody in that group decides to use their affiliation, their association, their so-called position to rip you off, well, they can more easily do so. So let me read a little bit about this. Last week's ABC miniseries chronicled the most famous financial fraud in recent American history. This dates back to February 2016. Bernie Madoff, who we are all familiar with, or at least most of us are, made off with $50 billion through a Ponzi scheme which devastated elite institutions. And there were a bunch of red flags going on, and they were waving left, right, and center, but people ignored it because mainly you don't really think that your best friend or your business associate of years and years or a reputable person in your community is going to do such a thing. The tragedy itself was also a sort of warning that victims were not just random victims. He decimated a segment of wealthy Jewish people and charitable organizations. He ripped off people like Elie Wiesel, and he even ripped off a foundation called Hadassah, a Jewish organization designed to help other people. So I like this comment. Who defrauds Hadassah? That's like mugging your grandmother. Such crimes would not be possible without the cultural ease and social entree Madoff enjoyed in the Jewish community. This is called affinity fraud. Affinity fraud is depressingly common, shocking. And this person is an African American who wrote the article, and he says, "My own incidental exposure would be comical if the stakes weren't so serious. I happen to live in a majority African American neighborhood in South Chicagoland. Although you wouldn't know it to look at me, marketing algorithms based on my street address and some of my purchases apparently reveal that I'm a middle-aged, middle-class African American man." So based on this, I guess some ripoff artists put together an impressive volume of sales pitches based on robocalls that President Obama is trying to refinance his mortgage, or at least advising him to. Now, I don't know how President Obama got involved in this, or his name was tossed around to strengthen the sales pitch. But then he started getting a whole bunch of calls about lowering his interest rates and so on and so forth, and refinancing. And this all got very, very messy, and so inspired him, obviously, to write an article about this. And this can happen to anyone, so don't think that this cannot happen to you. And it is based on developing trust. Trust because there's an affinity between you and that person. Maybe they are the same culture, or the same religion, or belong to the same organization. There's an affinity there, and so people let down their boundaries, and boom, they get in there, and then you're in horrible reverse mortgage deals, or you're putting your money into a Ponzi scheme and what have you. And the most vulnerable people, another article that I found that is very, very significant, is that the elderly are really at risk here, because as you age, your brain becomes less able to detect fraud. Not good for older people who are suffering from Alzheimer's, different forms of dementia. This is an article by Annie Nova, and the article states that the elderly fall for scams, and they fall because they have cognitive decline, and so they are less likely to pay attention to negatives, and they're not as vigilant against possible threats. And guess who are the most threatening people to the elderly with regards to fraud? Well, their own relatives. There's a lot of financial abuse going on, and so I just wanted to put that out there, because we have to be vigilant against our vulnerabilities. I want to direct you to the mind map for a minute and discuss panel number 5. And with regards to the article, our defense mechanisms weaken. And so who's vulnerable to letting in all of this poison, so to speak? Who's vulnerable are people who have been groomed to trust, who have no boundaries, who have cognitive decline, who have families that didn't protect them well enough. And I know we're going to get a call in soon from Robert. So, Robert, you're welcome to call in any time. And I want to mind map how this happened to you and what we can glean from this, because it's really important that we understand the process, the grooming process, so that when people fall victim to this, they can recognize that this is not just a random act, that this is actually sourced back to childhood injuries that then that then set them up for this kind of fraud. So whenever you're ready, Robert, please do call in. And that number is 323 524 2599. Okay, so I'm going to go on a little bit more about this, and I trust Robert is going to be calling in. In any case, you are welcome to call in, and let's talk about rip-offs, affinity fraud, why this is happening all over the world, why this is happening within the communities, and who is vulnerable other than just people who are elderly and have cognitive decline. Why is it that we are so vulnerable to being ripped off? Okay, and please do feel to call in while we wait for Robert. Hopefully he will be calling in because he's so passionate about this subject, and he asked me to do this show, and I invited him in onto the show as a guest so he can speak to this subject. Hopefully he's still up and about and able to call in. Robert, call in. And in the meantime, if Robert doesn't call in, then you call in, and let's talk about how you got set up for such a thing. It's pretty tragic. So let's discuss it from a mind map perspective. We have talked about this on other shows, but it's just so pervasive now, and it can happen to anyone. It can happen to anyone, even if you have a level of financial sophistication, even if you have a very logical head. It's natural that that human beings want to trust other people. Just like we want to trust our parents, we want to be in a situation where we can feel comfortable and relaxed and trust statements like, I'll take care of you. I have your back. Don't worry, you're special. These are very meaningful setup statements for people who need attention, who are feeling that they are hurting, desperately hurting for money, desperately hurting for feeling special. So let's look at what kind of childhood wounds would cause such a thing. So how about parents who, for example, I'm going to panel 1 right now. Let's guess at this. What kind of parents would set you up for fiscal affinity fraud type abuse? How about the general topic that I bring up much of the time, narcissistic parents? So what is a narcissistic parent? A narcissistic parent is somebody that wants to bleed you dry, that wants to take your emotions, that puts their own needs before your needs. So if you are used to parents who switch the system up like this, if you're used to parents who would rather take care of themselves over you, then you are subject to being vulnerable to this because you've already been groomed. So going back to childhood wounds, there are 5 childhood wounds here. One of the wounds is physical abuse, and then we've got emotional name-calling, verbal abuse. We've got sexual abuse. We have neglect, and we have smothering, which is the controlling type of abuse, controlling, manipulating. These abuses cast a shadow over a person's psyche and leave the person vulnerable. So whatever form of abuse you've been through, it punctures, it actually violates your ability to protect yourself. It's kind of like breaking the boundaries. It violates your boundaries. And once you've been violated either physically or sexually or emotionally, then the door's open for passing through and controlling and manipulating you. So I really do want to hear from you. I guess Robert maybe missed the time zone, or I know he's in another state. In any case, I invite you to call in and let's mind map how this could have happened to you, because I'm sure there are a lot of people out there who are listening and they're scratching their heads, or you're scratching your head thinking, I'm a smart person, I'm a good businessman. How is it that I put all my trust in such and such an individual? How could that have happened to me? And it happens a lot. Okay, so let's talk about the grooming process. So starting with panel 1, you're groomed to be violated. okay, physically, emotionally, sexually. You're groomed to be violated. Panel 2, you have a reaction to this wound, and the reaction is a reaction of pain, of shutting down, or maybe even mistrusting the world. And then you encode material like, I don't trust myself, I don't trust others. And then what that sets you up for is a feeling of, now you're aching for trust. You're aching for pillars. So maybe your mother and your father were not there for you. Maybe they were not the support system that you needed. So now you're vulnerable. And now I'm going to add a little more to that. What if somebody recently died in your family and you're aching to be part of a group, or you're aching to be part of a family, and there's this kind of a covert deal going on that, we will love you, we will take care of you, but there's a deal here that has to be enacted before we let you into our special community, which brings me to the other point. When you're made to feel unspecial. So look at panel number 3, negative core beliefs. I'm not good enough. I'm not lovable. I'm not important enough to be number 1. Look what the schemer is offering. That schemer is offering to make you feel special. So there was something in the article that caught my eye. Let's see if I can find it. Something about being made special. Okay, I can't find it right now. But when people are led to feel special, they'll do things like give out their social security number. They will compromise areas of their life that they never thought they would compromise. They would enter into poor financial deals that otherwise maybe in a different state they wouldn't enter into. And in this particular case, the cognitive decline, the elderly, very, very vulnerable. So how do you protect yourself from all of this? Well, how you protect yourself from all of this is to go back and heal these childhood wounds so that you don't end up in panel number 4, 5, 6, and replicate the horror story of the violations and the betrayals. Because at the core of this is a betrayal, a big betrayal. Because you're putting your hands, just like as an infant, you're putting your hands in parents that didn't protect you, didn't have your back, that used you to milk you dry of your emotions, or milk you dry of anything, including your money, making you vulnerable to other people that do this to you as well. So think about it. How did you end up being defrauded by your family or your friends, by your community leaders? And obviously this doesn't happen in all communities. I'm not suggesting that everyone is out to get us. I am suggesting, however, that you put up boundaries. And I am suggesting that you not give out information that doesn't belong in other people's hands. And so what are some of the clues to you that that you're vulnerable? I'm going to make up my own list here. I think number 1, coming from a family that didn't protect you. Okay, number 2, having a loss in life. If you recently lost a husband or a wife, or you recently lost a parent or a lover, somebody of significance to you, then you're vulnerable to needing more support, and needing more advice, and needing somebody to proverbially wrap their arms around you and give you advice and give you support. Also, people pleasers are vulnerable to this because they're offering you something special. So if you don't feel particularly particularly special, and they're waiving the "you're special because I'm letting you in on this very special deal, and I'm not allowing other people in because this is information that only certain people can have, and only certain people can join this particular investment." Now they're playing right into the hands of the hands of, "I will now boost your specialness." So I'm just going to read a little bit more. Pretty much any powerful connection humans make with others provides some correspondingly powerful opportunity for affinity fraud. And this can go on in a religious community. It can go on in LGBTQ community. It can go on in a cultural group. It can go on really, really anywhere. So I want to hear from you. 323-524? 25? 524-2599. And I want to hear your story, because I know that we talk a lot about narcissism. We talk a lot about what narcissistic abuse does to people, how it lowers self-esteem, how it leaves people with negative core beliefs like "I'm not special enough, I'm not important to be number one, I'm worthless, I'm a loser," and there's nothing more special than to be tagged as "you're special, and I'm giving you a special deal, and this deal is time limited." And what makes people jump so high is when they're feeling very special, and the deal is time limited, so it incentivizes people to jump without thinking. And we're not talking about buying a bag of potato chips here. We're talking about people investing their life savings. So this is very, very dangerous stuff. And one of my favorite quotes in my book is a quote by Einstein. And that quote is, "Smart people solve problems, and geniuses prevent them." And that's why I'm doing this show, because I want you to be aware of the red flags. I want you to be aware of your vulnerabilities. I want you to be aware of people around you and their motivations. And if somebody is pressuring you and you have a gut feeling that something's a little bit off, listen to your gut. And if you're older, you might not even respond to this gut feeling. It's very interesting that as we cognitively decline, we don't have that so-called gut feeling warning. Less brain means less of that signaling people describe as a gut feeling, and that is missed in the population of people. I think there was a age range that they talked about, 75 to 89. Subjects ages 75 to 89 also exhibited some signs of memory impairment and were more likely than younger people to click on a suspicious email that would leave their personal data vulnerable to criminals. One of my favorite attempted scams that I've received is a call from the IRS. "Oh, you are delinquent in your taxes. If you don't pay us right now, then you will be having to have some severe penalties. Please leave us your Social Security card and number and give us your credit card." And these people, they just know how to present the material so that they can easily create fear, because this is all fear-based. Let's get you nice and scared and vulnerable. And if you're nice and scared and vulnerable, then that's another way to scam people as well. And I know that there are people out there listening. I certainly have had my own share of trusting and putting my hands in the hands of no good hands. And so I'm familiar with this both professionally and personally. And it's really, really important that you protect yourself. And if you don't feel that you're able to protect yourself, then one thing you can do is just take a few days to think about it and discuss the situation with others that you might trust. Maybe discuss it with an attorney. Maybe discuss it with somebody that you have a really good trusting history with. I'm not talking about a person that's going to scam you, obviously, but you don't have to act on things so quickly. Because remember, when we're hurt, we tend to have reactions. We don't like to be in a state of anxiety or depression. We don't like to be in a state of unbalance. And so sometimes to feel like we're being emotionally held and soothed, we hand over our power to other people. And this is where we can be vulnerable to this kind of thing. So I want to hear from you. Robert, I'm so sorry you didn't call in because this is your favorite topic in the world. I hope you're listening, and I still hope that you're going to call in because I know that you have quite a story to tell. Robert's family did some really horrible Ponzi scheme rip-off acts, and he really was passionate about telling his story, but maybe you got the time zone wrong. So, okay, I'm sure there are other people out there who have stories to tell, so I do want to hear from you. And in the meantime, I'm going to read some more information. Glenn Beck's connection with Goldline was one notorious example of such products. Beck's program relentlessly depicted an American economy on the verge of hyperinflation and collapse, and an apocalypse naturally hastened by Barack Obama and other liberal political leaders. During commercial breaks, Beck's audience was then conveniently exposed to Goldline, a purveyor of dicey gold investments. Okay, so how do you set somebody up for this? You create a crisis. You pull in some names that people feel strongly about, and then you pin the blame on those guys, and then the crisis is created, and then you're the savior. So this is a really, really bad setup. So let's go back to the mind map and see why this is so. So children naturally want pillars in their lives. They naturally want saviors. If you look at panel number 3, it's a metaphor for mother and father. And if you see the DNA strand, it wraps around each other, representing a system of a family system, ideally supporting the people in the system, supporting the children that are supposed to grow and be nurtured by mother and father. And if this system is non-existent, if mother is missing from the formula or father is missing from the formula, you can see that the system will not be sustainable, and it is at risk to go into panel number 4, which is chaos, which is the breakdown, the breakdown of the family bonds. So when we feel that these family bonds are broken or breaking, we want to substitute somebody in and save the day and take us out of this horrible, painful chaos. So we will use trust, false trust, as our defense mechanism against the fear of the unknown. So we will pick somebody that we know. And that's how these affinity frauds happen, because it's somebody that we know. It's not just only a solicitor on the phone trying to get your phone number. These Bernie Madoff type of people are known in their community, and they may even for years have great reputations of helping others. And so they're very crafty. So don't be misled by the fact that they've helped and helped and helped for years, and then they'll build up this trust. And then when they have enough of this trust built up, then they could start injecting their schemes into your life. And I think we have a caller. So hello, you are on the couch with Dr. Judy. Hello? Are you still there?
Yes. Hi.
Hi. And what is your name, please?
My name is Robert.
Robert. Hi.
Topic.
Yeah. Okay. I'm glad you're calling in. I've been doing a lot of talking, and I hope you didn't forget about the day and the time. Well, welcome back.
I actually did not forget about the day and the time. I took a quick power nap. I work in a couple hours, and for some reason, my alarm didn't go off, and I apologize, and I hope I didn't miss anything, but here I am.
Okay, I'm really glad you're here because I've been talking a lot about vulnerability and how when you don't have the family pillars to protect you, and when you've been violated with physical or sexual or verbal abuse or emotional neglect, how you're basically you're groomed to be violated. So that's where the violation started. So if you don't mind sharing, and I know that you are very, very passionate about this, and I'm really glad that you're sharing your story because it's preventative. You know, like I like to quote Einstein, smart people solve problems, geniuses prevent them. So let's be geniuses tonight and prevent a lot of people from losing sometimes their life savings. And not only their life savings, but committing to more than their life savings and then going upside down in mortgage payments and being charged enormous interest rates because they signed up for the wrong plan. So go ahead, Robert. Tell everyone your story and then maybe connect it back to how you became vulnerable to being taken advantage of.
Well, I'm going to start at being a child in a family business and a scapegoat child. And what happened was I was told, if you need money, Bob, pick up an apron and get to work. I was 13 years old. I've been in the business for 25 years, this Ponzi, and I didn't know something called allowance. My sister drove a fancy car, and she had allowance, so I was told to just go to work at the restaurant where there was corruption, and I didn't know any better. I was 13 years old.
And how come your sister didn't have to work?
Why? You know what? At 13, I really just didn't know any better. I just figured because why? Because she just wore the makeup and she was the golden child, and they didn't want her hands to get dirty, you know?
I see.
And I worked there from about 94, 93 to about 98. That's when Ponzi got caught and corrupted, like which I told you and all that stuff in the email.
Okay, so just qualify who's Ponzi, because you keep referring to Ponzi did this, and Ponzi did that. Who's Ponzi?
My biological father.
Okay.
My father.
Mr. Ponzi himself, right?
Correct.
Okay, and when you were 13 years old, was there any kind of a, son, I want you to come in for X amount of hours and I will be paying you this amount of money? Was there any contract there, even a verbal one, between a father and son?
Not at all. It was just about if you need money, get back to work. And there was also the making fun of part, which was saying that the apron was bigger than how tall I was. So it was kind of like smack in the face. Like I remember always hearing the apron that was around him was taller than how he was.
And were you paid?
So
Were you paid any kind of allowance or any kind of money for
I never
helping out?
got I never got a quote unquote allowance like a sibling did for not working. I was just told to work, and I made measly money. And then my dad's partner, his son worked too, and then I later found out that he made more money than me, and then it became another family dispute between both parties. So it was really about just squeezing the smallest person in.
Okay. And so basically what I'm hearing is that there was no real deal here. It was very loose. Is that correct?
Very loose.
Loose,
That's
very loose.
100% correct.
Yes, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and that's one of the things to look for when there's no real deal and there are no well, in big cases, you're supposed to have contracts, and lawyers are supposed to look over the contracts, and people are supposed to be looked into in terms of their reputation and so on and so forth. Well, you were only 13 years old, so you're not going to look into anything. And every child wants to have some money to spend. And so early on, did you feel like he kept his word that, yeah, son, you've been working hard, here's
No.
a nice little vacation money, or here's some money for some items that you might want, or something special, anything like that going on?
Not at all. I felt that I was working because I needed to just buy maybe a videotape or a pretzel, or even at that time, 13 to 18. 18 was when the business collapses. Most Ponzi schemes do collapse. And I was mostly buying cigarettes, drinking black coffee, going to Catholic school, and going to work. And I was so immersed in work because the family life was helter-skelter, metaphorically speaking, and I did feel there was a using. Plus, when the partner's son got caught, the partner got caught for doing
what?
corrupt activity. Ponzi's partner, he got caught for selling drugs, but his partner's son, whose name was Fred, who's also a little bit years older than me, he got paid more than I did. So I remember there being fights in the house about why he got paid more than me. So it automatically was a using.
Okay.
But at 13, I just knew that I had to go to work, make money, and I couldn't really connect the dots. It was kind of, you just do what you do. You please the parent, but you don't really know any better. Even though you think there's corruption, you think it's normal.
So what made you know that there was something rotten in the state of Denmark, that there was something really corrupt going on here, other than, hey, you're 13 and your dad's making you wear the apron and help out at the restaurant, and so what really alerted you to this gut feeling, or the facts that something was dreadfully wrong here and people were really being scammed? What gave you that idea?
Okay, well, I was told around 16 years old that my dad's partner, Fred, was caught selling pounds and pounds and pounds of marijuana. And I really didn't know much about that at all. So I was completely naive. I didn't even...
So this was back in the day before marijuana was legal, correct? Yes?
No, this was where marijuana was illegal.
Right, before marijuana was legal, before it was legal. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
And Well, I was going to school, and then I just remember there was meetings, and when you mentioned about Ponzi, Peter to pay Paul, my grandmother was the one who contributed to Ponzi. So my dad used my grandmother at this first restaurant, and then when I remember going to that restaurant and was told, Bob, don't use the phone because they're tapped. And
Wait, I'm sorry.
thinking,
Don't use the phone. This is what?
Because they're tapped. The government is listening on the phone calls.
Okay, so
Yes,
here's what I'm making of it so far, and correct me if my thinking is off, that the restaurant was kind of like the front for another business that was going on. Is that correct?
Yes,
Okay,
it was.
okay,
Yes, it was.
so there was something off in terms of the intention of the restaurant. The intention of the restaurant was not just to sell food; it was to fund at that time illegal marijuana. Correct?
Activity.
Yeah, illegal.
Well, no, I
activity.
do believe there was other things involved as far as money laundering and paying people under the table and changing the money on the books as well. My mother was a participant in that, as say Bob Sr. would say to Rita, my mother, don't say we made this much, say we made that much. But
Okay.
at 18, I really didn't know. So let me just a little fast forward. My dad went and got convicted because his partner, Fred, who did all the marijuana selling, was pulled over and spilled the beans on everything and everybody. And then my dad was forced to go to jail. And
Okay.
because it was either that or take a plea bargain, and he used my college fund at the time, which I did not know.
Oh wow!
To
Wow.
yes, to pay for his lawyers, which I did not know. I was
Okay,
told that it
okay.
was done by a stock market, that the money was lost in 2000 with the stock market.
Okay, so let's regroup on this. Okay, so what we see is a family system gone terribly wrong. We know that grandma was funding something that maybe she didn't know she was funding, correct? She might not have even been aware that she was funding a horrible money laundering system that was going to end up collapsing and breaking everybody. Is that right? Or was she privy to this information?
I think that she was very much into protecting my dad at any cost,
Okay.
which became very confusing.
Okay, so let's go back to panel one for a minute because I want to connect the dots here. And what we're looking at is smothering and overprotecting her son. So rather than going with ethics and rather than teaching her son to do the right thing, she invested in propping up a son and teaching him really, really poor ethics. Is that correct?
Yes,
Okay.
that's
Okay.
absolutely correct.
Okay. So she was in a sense, even though she thought she was being a protective, kind mom, she was basically co-signing a system that was going to collapse on everyone. And then your college funds got used in the service of bailing him out of the situation? We're trying to bail him out of the situation?
Well, no, well, what happened was I didn't even know that my college fund was used. I was lied to, and I was told that my college fund blew up with the stock market, and there's no money for you to go to college.
And how did
found
you
out-
find out? Yeah, how did you find out that it wasn't the stock market?
I found out many years later, and it was only through word of mouth, and then I connected the dots because I really was very much naive. When the partner got caught with selling the marijuana, my dad was faced with all these charges of money laundering, tax evasion, coercing witnesses, and then throughout the years when I was 18, 19, 20, 21, I did a what the Freud. I went back to business with my dad. I started to connect the dots. But at the time, I still was wet behind the ears, meaning I couldn't believe that somebody would be that evil, because it was always, he would always look me in the eye and groom me and say, Bob, me and you will make a lot of money together. It would always be father and son.
There it is.
There it is.
That's the affinity fraud. And what little boy doesn't want the approval of daddy? And daddy and he powering up together, his big arms wrapped around you, pulling you into a very special deal where you two are going to make a lot of money together. So is everybody listening to how this whole system got set up? And grandma's a part of it, and then you're being vampired, and grandma's being vampired, but maybe she knows that she's being vampired, but she doesn't want to call her own son out on the poor ethics of what's going on. So instead she shores up his horrible behavior. And then ultimately, let's go back to something that Fritjof Capra, and I quote him in my book, talks about, which is sustainability. If you are building an unsustainable system, whether it is a house that's not sustainable or a family system that's not sustainable or anything that's built on a house of cards, meaning, in this case, coming from the consciousness of vampiring, a consciousness of using other people, it is only a matter of time before it goes into chaos, defenses, and breakdowns. And that's what you experience: chaos, defenses, and breakdowns. And what did this personally leave you with? Because I know you've been working really, really hard to get out of the psychological mess that this left you with. And I know it landed you in horrible negative core beliefs that you've been more cognizant of, and busting lies and working the mind map. So in general, what kind of shape did this whole process leave you in?
Okay, well, originally the grooming was, I was already bullied at home by my sister and my cousin. And then my mother was what's called the committer, who allowed it to happen. My dad was the omitter. So when I went to business with him at 13 years old, I didn't know anything about allowance. I thought it was only meant for a girl. I mean, this is how wet behind the ears and naive I was. I wasn't told to go to art school and fulfill my dream. No. So once I did that, I just thought that I was, deserving to be bullied. And that was my negative core belief, that I was unworthy. I wouldn't be the good enough son. And it felt natural to just follow Daddy's orders, because he wouldn't like me if I was going to art school, so maybe he would like me if I was going in this way. But then it became sketchy, and it was normal that things were messed up. That was the normal schema.
And did
At
your
13 to 18? Yes.
Did your gut tell you that something was off, or were you too involved with pleasing him for your gut to really give you that information?
Well, I knew something was off a little bit, but I'm going to tell you, from 13 to 18 years old, I was also going through high school. And I also had to think about my future, and was also told that my dad was going to go to jail for money laundering and corrupting the government, and all of these other charges, coercing witnesses. There was a grand jury testimony. So I kind of was like Dorothy with the house spinning. I was just going through the flow, and I didn't really know that much. But I did a what the Freud when he got out of jail.
So just
and
to
did his
clarify,
time.
Dorothy, as in the Wizard of Oz, when the house spun around and she went unconscious, and so everything was spinning around, and you really were not that conscious. And what was what the Freud repetition principle that you found yourself doing?
What the Freud repetition that I found myself doing
Mm-hmm.
was when he went to, he did a plea bargain. I'm sitting in jail with my crying mommy dearest, and he paid his dues. I was pretty much relieved. Then I had my own job at a supermarket, and then he came back. He met one of his friends who did have a small business that was the same with his original business. Beef, pork, Italian specialties. And then he goes, look, Bob, you're making all this money in the supermarket. How about if you come in my restaurant, and guess what? We'll make a lot more money. You'll clear X amount. You'll have 2 days off.
And wait, whose
Vacation
business was
pay.
this? Whose business was this?
This was when my dad got out of jail. He took over one of his former partners, which was a cousin, not the original one that sold the drugs. It was the one that he grew up with.
So this is round two, okay? Right, round two, and
this is round two.
yeah, round two. What the Freud round two. Okay, so
Yeah.
are you beginning to all connect the dots that unless you go back to the original wound, which was narcissistic parents who acted in their own best interest, and a multi-generational grandma who supported and co-signed this horrible system rather than call her son on becoming responsible and not funding such a thing, because ultimately she didn't do anybody any favors. So this WTF round two, was there anything? How long did it take you to finally realize you're in another bad situation?
Well, literally as soon as I left the supermarket where I had friends and people that cared about me and I was making legitimate money,
Yeah.
I literally felt like metaphorically, oh my God, I'm being buried alive. And I did not
Buried
trapped.
alive. And by the way, I want to leave some time. We're almost out of time. I want to leave some time for the song you picked called Scream by Michael Jackson. But I want to make a point here that, people are so excited about making tons of money. And there was a quote here. Again, I want to see if I can find it, but it doesn't matter. I remember it. It said something about consistent money in the stock market. Here it is. Once Americans internalize the reality that vanilla stock and bond index funds basically outperform everything else, and that vanilla fixed rate mortgages are the safest way to get a loan, they'll save themselves a lot of time. They just might save themselves a lot of heartache too. So your quote vanilla job, which was steady, you had friends, you had a paycheck, you were paying your taxes, and on and on and on, and you can depend on it, that wasn't as interesting, right, as making that quick buck, because you were already let down. So here you go again. Groom
I was
to
also not only groomed, my family household, I was always scapegoated. So whatever I did, I felt wrong. So I did feel like I was pleasing Daddy, and I did feel like, oh my God, maybe my dad will appreciate me and honor me. However,
that dies hard. That dies hard.
That never happened. And then I didn't really know any better, because then I was the parentified child that when he was in jail in a halfway house, it was, yo, Rob, just look out for your mother. Be the man of the house. And I knew that term was very disgusting to me, but I felt like I had to do what I had to do. And then it was like I was spoiled. He would always, hey Bob, here's $20 here, $20 there. It was very so corrupt, and I didn't know any better. My whole school life was sabotaged
And
by
there's the intermittent reinforcement. Intermittent reinforcement. Here's $20 here, $20 there. Keeps the system going. And I know we only have 5 minutes, and I do want to get to the song that you chose. And you did share with me that you feel that you were what did you say? Buried alive? Is that how you felt during this process?
That's how I felt when I did What the Freud with his second business. And you mentioned Buried Alive and vaguely in one of your books, and maybe you could specify it, because once he looked into my eyes with his big eyes, his face all cleaned up.
Yeah.
Bob, we're gonna make all this money. It will stay in the family. You could go on vacation, pay time off.
Right.
I remember having dreams and nightmares of saying, "Oh my God, I'm buried alive."
Okay, so let me speak to that, because we literally only have 3 minutes left. So my view on that is that you knew that you were trapped in a system, and that he always had the one-upsmanship, and that you didn't have power, and that you were buried alive under this feeling of powerlessness. And so now I'm going to go to scream, because what is a scream is this intense feeling coming out of you, and you couldn't really scream, because when you're buried alive, what happens when you're buried alive and you scream? Who can hear you? Nobody. Okay, so Michael Jackson's lyrics, Scream, featuring Janet Jackson. Tired of injustice, tired of the schemes. The lies are disgusting. So what does it mean? Damn it. Kicking me down, I got to get up. As jacked as it sounds, the whole system sucks. Damn it. So even while you're being buried alive, you know the system sucks. And then Janet says... Right? Janet says, peek in the shadow, come into the light. You tell me I'm wrong, then you better prove you're right. You're selling out souls, but I care about mine. I've got to get stronger, and I won't give up the fight. So somehow she's trying to come into the light and expose this horrible, silencing scream. With such confusions, don't it make you want to scream, says Michael. Make you want to scream, says Janet. You're bash abusing victims within the scheme. And then Janet says, you try to cope with every lie they scrutinize. So it seems like Janet is trying to come into the light, correct? She represents that. Is that how you see it also? Somebody, please have, and both of them are saying, somebody, please have mercy, because I just can't take it. Stop pressuring me. Just stop pressuring me. Stop pressuring me. Make me want to scream. Stop pressuring me. And then it goes on with, tired of you telling the story your way. It's causing confusion. You think it's okay. Damn it. So everything's been reframed. The story your way, your father's story, his story. Everything will be all right. And then Janet says, you keep changing the rules. And that's what your father and family did. They kept changing the rules. While I keep playing the game, I can't take it much longer. So Janet wants to bust out of this psychological prison. And then Michael says, with such confusion, don't it make you want to scream? And then Janet says, make you want to scream. You're a bash abusing victim within the scheme. You find your pleasure scandalizing every lie. And then it ends on it goes on and on, but I'll end here because we're out of time. Oh, Father, please have mercy, because I just can't take it. Stop pressuring me. And I'm interpreting it as, stop pressuring me to be part of this. Get me out of here. Just want to scream. Just want to make me scream. So we're out of time, Robert. I know we're out of time. We just have a few seconds. I want to remind everybody that the Mind Map video series is still at that special deal of $95. I really want everyone out there to learn the system. And Robert, I know you've been through the Mind Map video system yourself. and you're always a person that works on your own issue. And now what you're doing is, instead of screaming, you're talking and you're telling the truth, and you're passionate about sharing this information. So maybe some of you out there can learn from this experience. So thank you so much, Robert. Thank you, everyone, for listening. And I'm glad that you had a chance to be on this episode, because I know you really wanted to. So I know we'll speak again. And thank you, and good night, everyone.